We are back once again with Erika Brown of the Cricket coming to us from her office in downtown Manchester by the Sea. How are you, Erika? Good to see you again.
Hey, Corey.
Okay, so quickly, you did want to follow up. We talked a little bit last week about the Finance Committee. What has developed since?
Yeah. Well, it's not a development, it's just a continuation. It's a very odd thing because typically the finance committee in any municipality doesn't kick up to this degree at this point in the season. Usually they start in the fall where departments start to give in their budgets. The FinCom gets, slowly budgets from the library and from the public safety and from, DPW, et cetera. And that usually happens in the fall. And then they start kicking up January 1 of every year. And that's any municipality. That's like their schedule because, the end of their fiscal year is June 30th. So here we are in the middle of July. We're on the verge of August, right? Or actually, yeah, it's the beginning of August. And typically it'd be crickets right now, right? You'd be on the buffer season. Guess what? Finance committee last week, we talked about the fact that the FinCom chair, Sarah Mellish in Manchester, proposed a pretty dramatic cut in the reserves for the town, which is essentially their savings accounts. And she wanted to take it down by 2/3 from 15 point something percent of the budget to 5% of the budget, which was pretty dramatic. And that's actually working its way through the system. I guess next week they're going to be revisiting the idea of the reserves. And she made a reference in this last meeting to the fact that the town accountant was researching reserves, which is what I did for my article. I wonder if she's going to research new towns or not. But we're going to really see reserves, I think, from the FinCom in a clearer state next week. However, related to that, and that's why it's kind of happening, now I understand. Related to reserves is this idea of why do you have reserves? Because you have big things on the horizon, right? And we talked about capital expenses, and Ann Harrison, who is the chairman of the select board, she has a different philosophy. And she says, listen, you have to have strong savings because first of all, you don't want to get caught flat footed. But second of all, we've got some pretty big projects on the horizon. They include a new DPW headquarters, a garage, an office, a public safety headquarters and garage, a council on aging home, which isn't as, big or important, but it's been, sort of a pebble in the shoe of Manchester for a long time. So they want to finally deal with it. And then there's also the water and sewer treatment, the water treatment plant, which is right on the water. We're the only town, I guarantee, who has a waterfront water and sewer treatment plant.
Prime real estate, yeah.
Exactly. We have prime real estate. I know what we're going to do. We're going to process our, excrement right on the waterfront. Only the best for Manchester.
Yeah.
Anyway, no. So in all seriousness, that's a big, big job. And then on top of that, we have this issue of PFAS and sort of remediating for PFAS, which is what every municipality across the country is racing to do right now. So here's the big thing that happened in the last meeting. It was sort of a part, I guess I'm going to call it a part 2 of the reserves discussion, because the DPW chair, head came in to talk about his budget. Now, super early in the season, as I just said, right? Well, guess why? Because, and this came out of the mouth of Kory Curcuru, who is on the committee. He went through all those projects, Chuck Dam, the head of the DPW, with the finance committee last week. And he went through all of those things. I just told you, he said, the DPW, they want to move it up to School Street. We've talked about all this stuff before. And he said, and then by the way, we haven't talked about Essex Elementary. We need a new Essex Elementary School. That's another big capital expense. Yep. So you talk about all the capital expenses. Kory Curcuru on the finance committee listened to the whole thing. He goes, wait a minute, by my math, that adds up to, and he did all the math, out of his mouth, $200 million.
Ooh.
Yeah, $200 million. So there you go. Yeah. So that's over the next 30 years. And that's a combination of things that would actually get paid for in real time. And that's where reserves comes in. But then also it's big things that are going to be bonded, that are going to be paid for over time through loans, right? So that's why you talk about, your bond rating and all that stuff. But it's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's a lot. And it just shows that there must have been, going back 20, 30 years, a lot of deferred maintenance. One separate thing that has nothing to do with the $200 million, by the way, is the remediation of the pipe system. The water pipe system in Manchester needs to be upgraded. And it's been upgraded for the last like 10 years on a ongoing basis. Well, Chuck Dam happened to mention, and he specializes in water, right? Water infrastructure. He happened to mention that there's another $37 million worth of pipe replacement that needs to happen. Now, that doesn't happen at once. It's a little bit each year. You're talking the next 30, 40 years that's going to happen. So don't, don't get your panties in a bunch.
Yeah.
But it's crazy, it's sobering is what it is to look at that. I don't think it's $200 million in all credit to Maury. I love the fact that he's being conservative and he's probably getting the hard truth, getting people used to the hard truth. It's probably between, I don't know, I mean, I'm not a finance person nor an infrastructure person, but I think the earlier estimates were $100 million in capital expenses. That didn't include some pretty important things. So maybe it's not 200, but it's a lot. So what was interesting to me though is Sarah Mellish, who is also the chairman of the ZBA, she happened to mention in passing in the finance committee meeting, she said, well, cell signaling is coming in, they're going to help. And cell signaling hasn't even gone before the boards yet. That's awfully presumptuous to not only think that they're going to go through that process and going to get approvals, but then they're also going to start paying for everything. So that also kind of was interesting. And then another thing that was interesting, an interesting moment that kind of was like a back-to-back thing, and that also had to do with Sarah Mellish. By the way, Sarah Mellish is not going to be, I don't think cell signaling is going before the ZBA. So that would be problematic if the chairman of the ZBA board was already talking about them being approved when they haven't even gone before the boards. I think I'm almost positive that cell signaling is going before the planning board and not the ZBA. So Sarah Mellish is quite safe making a reference to cell signaling coming in and giving money. But the other thing that was kind of wild is that, Manchester has two pretty major areas of downtown that are built on filled tidal lands, right? And one of them is behind Town Hall. The Town Hall parking lot will flood, and it'll flood increasingly over, as global warming happens. And why am I bringing this up? Because, on the one hand, and I'll bet other communities are kind of going through the same thing. On the one hand, for the MBTA zoning thing, we've talked about that mandate for density within a half a mile of the train station. On one hand, Sarah Mellish, who is on the MBTA committee, she, I believe, is the zoning board, ZBA appointee for that. They're talking about saying to the state, listen, we can't build on filled tidal lands. They're going to be filled. That's irresponsible, right? So they're saying you should change our requirement because of that, because we're on tidal lands. But then in the finance committee with the Chuck Dam, apropos of nothing, she says to Chuck, hey, why don't we build a new facility in the parking lot behind Town Hall?
Oh.
So I guess my point is, there's a lot of stuff swirling around, all of which are really important and all of which seem to be coming to a head right now. And by right now, I mean over the next several years. There's a lot of just big things happening, and it's really clear. So a lot of stuff going on with, money, financing, planning, and figuring it all out. So
Gotcha.
Was that too wonky for you?
No. It's all good. Was there any other follow-up with the MBTA task force, or is that buttoned up now, do you think?
The task force has started. They're actually working pretty hard towards getting an article in town meeting next April, which is going to come up before we know it. And that way they have two bites at the apple. If it doesn't go through in the way in which is probably is fully informed, let's call it that way, right? Because there is this issue about grants. By the way, grants, state grants, for all the people who say we're not interested in state or federal money because we don't want to be impure with our money, give them a bill for $200 million and see what they say about grants.
Yeah, I'll change my name to Grant. Let's
exactly.
go. Yeah.
So all that stuff is happening. So it's April, and they're on track. They had a meeting. They figured out their schedules, and that was actually in last week's paper, or in the current edition. Yeah. So that's
Gotcha.
good.
Erika, we have about a minute left. You want to talk about a couple things happening at the Essex Shipbuilding Museum?
Yeah, I feel like I'm ignoring Essex, but Essex has a lot of big stuff coming up. But two things that I wanted to call out just because I think they're awesome. Both of them are the Essex Shipbuilding Museum. The first one is familiar, so I'm going to say it first. Coming up in a couple weeks or a week and a half is the Greenhead's Gone party. That's the best party. You got to go to that, Kory.
It's a fun one, yeah.
Fun. I mean, you got to take a whack at the piñata if they're going to have it this year. They have a piñata of a big green head, and you get to whack it and get the candy out. It's just a fun party. That's awesome. They usually have just barbecue. It's just a really fun time. So that's awesome. And I love that Essex celebrates the drowning of all the larvae of greenheads. But then the other thing, and this is super quick, they're having this thing. It's, I think, the third annual, but I haven't noticed it before. Do you know that you can do a class? It's a 4-day intensive class at the Essex Shipbuilding Museum to build your own dory.
I don't think I knew that.
It's like awesome. I want to do it
Wow.
next year. We should do it together. But it's now it's $1,800 for the class. It's like wow. But you can do it with other people, by the way, for a small incremental fee. So and then you get a dory afterwards.
Very cool.
You get your own dory.
That's awesome. That sounds like a good
Get a
time.
boat. I think it's awesome. I mean, if you think about getting a boat afterwards, maybe it's not so expensive.
Yeah, this is true.
And that's coming up, by the way. There's only 8 slots. I'm sure they're sold out, but it's coming up next week.
Gotcha. Perfect. Okay, thanks for all you do, Erika. We appreciate it. We'll see you this time next week.
Bye, honey.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.